raise a family. They have some of the same opportunities that me and my wife.
You agreed that we need to see them as a terrorist organization.
On a private cloud server, yes or no?
To love country, to love God, and to try to do the right thing.
Worked for the nation and the interests of the people. Welcome to the Fresh Freedom Podcast. As you know, this is a podcast with freedom-loving freshmen in the House of Representatives, where we provide you a behind-the-scenes look at what's happening in Congress. I'm joined today by my fellow conservative freshman members, Josh Burkeen from Oklahoma, Keith Self from Texas, and our special guest today is Russell Fry from South Carolina. Russell is an Eagle Scout and a graduate from the University of South Carolina. He is a husband, father, and the freshman class president. And we're really happy that you're joining us today.
No, thanks for the opportunity. I think it's really great that y'all do this, and it's a good way to reach people kind of beyond traditional norms. And so happy to be here. Thanks.
My staff tell me that you come from pretty humble beginnings. You grew up in a cinder block home and with no air conditioning, no heat.
Yeah.
And did you ever think you'd find your way to Congress?
No, it's kind of, my family was a very working class family, and that was our first house. I mean, the winters our house was heated by kerosene, so the smell is somewhat disgusting and nostalgic at the same time, but, that's kind of how you grew up. And, my dad worked for a sign company. My mom was a bartender at a country club, and, they kind of lived that American dream where they just pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and opened up a small business, and we're able to provide for me and my brothers.
What was the small business?
Well, so my mom ended up going into court reporting, so she did depositions and stuff for lawyers, and so it was a way for her to stay home to make sure we weren't being bad kids. And my dad opened up his own sign business.
Oh, well.
And then you served in the state legislature.
I did.
In the House or the Senate?
The House.
Served in the House.
Yep, 7 years.
7 years. How does that change? How's that different from your time up here so far?
Yeah, very different. I mean, the state, we have a balanced budget, right? Which is not something that Washington doesn't have. We have deliberation on bills. I think the floor of the state house is a lot better than Congress. In Congress, you talk on the floor, you're kind of talking to a relatively empty chamber.
Right.
But the committee structure up here is a lot better, I think. Just the way that it rolls and the expertise that you can get. But it's very different coming up here, as I know you know.
Yeah, so of the three of us had a time in state legislature, county governance. We didn't have the title of being a judge, though, right? You had the title of being a judge.
Wait. Put a pin in that. Did you carry a judge when you were a judge?
Carry a judge?
Right, the firearm.
No.
But that's intriguing that you think the hearing process up here on the committee side, because you are right, we have experts, whereas in the state legislature, we're briefed before we go into committee, but then it's really us carrying the water, talking to each other, trying to convince each other on the state legislative body. So true. The old statement, quick's the slip between the cup and the lip. You've got direct access to experts versus state legislators trying to remember what they gathered in a week of study. So that's intriguing. But you're right about the floor access. And, I'll never forget staying in the chair, which I know you've been in the chair. All of us, I guess, have been in the chair here in Congress. Mm-hmm. But I'll never forget my first time. I wasn't in the member, but I watched this person, and they were like speaking to everybody in the room and I was in the chair so I could see. I was like, there was nobody there. And I thought, this is such theater. This is such theater. Shocking.
For me, committees are totally different than the way we did it back home. Because in the committees, in the state legislature, when a bill is going through, everybody's read the bill, and then you're talking to the bill sponsor, and you get to ask questions. And it's not just 5 minutes, you get to ask at whatever point you come up with a question. Yep. Okay? And then proponents come and testify. And in the state of Missouri, we don't limit who can come testify.
Right.
If somebody's got something to say about a piece of legislation, they get to say it, have their piece. And then they can speak for a bill, they can speak against a bill. So I think that makes for a better process because we're sitting there going through the language with a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah.
and fighting about where all the offensive parts of the bill might be.
Right.
That doesn't happen at all up here.
Right, I agree with that.
So this week we're going to be going directly into a lot of the stuff that's related to Keith's. It's really important to Keith's district, and that is dealing with some of the border issues.
We are. The border is going to be big on Saturday because we have a trucker convoy that left Virginia Beach today. Now they'll be in Texas on Saturday. I will be there. I'll have camera people there. Hopefully I'll get to speak. They'll also be in Yuma, Arizona, and San Ysidro, California. So they're coming from various places to various places. But I think this is wonderful. These is Americans, real Americans, working class Americans that are going to show up to say we've had enough. We expect our federal government to protect this nation, protect our sovereignty, and close the border. I encourage people to come. If you can, obviously Eagle Pass, Texas, Yuma, Arizona, San Ysidro, California, make the effort. Don't be intimidated. Let's get out and use our voices, because President Biden's not going to close the border. It doesn't matter if we pass the supplemental, which includes border funding. Mm-hmm. More funding is not going to close the border. More laws are not going to close the border. This is American people rising up to say enough.
I know this week we're going to take a step, or we're moving towards the impeachment of Mayorkas. What are your thoughts about that? And you guys can chime in. Like, what are your thoughts about?
Well, we tried once without taking it through the committee, and we couldn't do it. I'm very hopeful this time because the border since then has exploded. 302,000 in December. Yeah. I think we've got a better chance this time.
It's in my committee, so that comes up tomorrow. So we've been trying to present Chairman Green a very detailed case going through Federalist 65. Federalist 65, where Alexander Hamilton talks about what the whole process of impeachment was to be about. It talks about it being about an abuse of the public trust, and later on it says that the impeachment process, modeled after the British Parliament, was to be both a two-part system like they have in England today, or United Kingdom. And that's where ours is modeled after. That actually says that in Federalist 65. And then it goes on to say that it is a bridle in the hands of the legislative body to be used upon the executive servants of the government. And so we get a chance to pick up the reins and say, whoa. There's also a quote we've been utilizing in the committee about where Madison talks about that the very purpose of impeachment is to be able to those who betray the public trust. And it even says, even if it's an unruly, forget the characteristic that it describes of a president, even if a unjust president refuses to remove him, this is a great quote from Madison, it's the job of the legislature basically to remove someone under that unjust president.
I think you look at it. I mean, it has been a while since you've done this to an individual who was a cabinet level or a judge. It's been a while, I think, since they've done it. But I think this is the clearest case that you can have. And I've been saying that since the beginning of this Congress. The case is right there. Yeah. You just have to look at the operation of what is going on. I mean, he's essentially lied to Congress and lied to the American people when he says the border is secure. They thumb their nose at it. They never go down there to deal with it. You talk to the law enforcement folks in Texas or Yuma, Arizona, where we were in the Judiciary Committee. When was this? Back in March, I think. And they'll tell you it's never been worse. And to sit there and say that you have operational control of the border, which is the legal standard, right? That he's tasked with keeping, he's failed, completely failed, and miserably. I mean, we're not talking policy disagreements. I mean, I think impeachment should not be used for political purposes. But here, you have Mr. Mayorkas constantly tells lies to the Congress, to the American people. He doesn't do his job. He fails to uphold the law and the Constitution.
Deportation, detention, and parole, all things that the Immigration and Nationality Act says, this is what you shall do. And he's turned all those three elements upside down. When he sends a letter out to all of his staff, Customs and Border Patrol, and says no longer is illegal entrance into this country enough for detention and for deportation, when the Immigration and Nationality Act clearly says that is the reason.
Yeah. But those are details. What our audience ought to know The evidence is clear. It's 8 million people. It's 100,000 miners lost in the interior of the United States. It's tens of thousands of Chinese military-age males.
14,000, yeah.
14,000. So, I mean, it is now, that's the evidence that I think people need to be looking at.
And take a look at the cost of this, right? I mean, in a way, I mean, he's bankrupting the country, but bankrolling the cartels, which I think is completely abhorrent. I mean, that is just so counter to what he should be doing as a secretary.
So, and I agree, and I can't wait to vote to impeach Mayorkas. My question, does that fix anything?
No, the Senate's not going to do anything, but what we have to do is whatever you tolerate, you empower. And anytime that we have somebody that's serving as a bureaucrat, to our founders' commentary, if they're unjust, it's serving an unjust president who's not following congressional law, we can't determine what the Senate does, but if the House refuses to move the first process, which is impeachment, it's on the Senate whether they convict. But if we don't do that because, well, the Senate's not going to do anything, then every time a bureaucrat gets into office and wants to further lawlessness, they have the template to do that.
And I'm saying that to say that we understand that this is a political discussion at this point, because it's not going to go into fruition of him actually being fired or losing his job and being impeached. So the question is, what wins do we get out of it? And I think it's potentially a political win. The question is, how do we actually really substantively fix the border issue? I know that the Senate is talking. They are the ones, Republicans in the Senate. Your senator is negotiating.
There's only one way. It's a new president.
Yeah. The president could shut it all down right now. More laws is not going to. The only difference between a 45-year low of illegal immigration in 2017 compared to 302,000, whichever one of you said it a while ago in December, the highest number we've ever seen in a month. And oddly enough, y'all, I mean, when do you travel? You don't do it when it's freezing outside. Why is it that in December you have 302,000 breaking the record of any month, not May, not June, because they see potentially the writing on the wall that Donald Trump gets back into the presidency, and so they're coming in trying to finish this open border process. They're coming in now to get across, and so I totally concur. I think that there is a misperception that the Democrats, are willing to do anything. Sadly, I don't think they want to do anything. I think they want votes.
No, that's a completely fair critique, and the concern I have, and I've looked at some of it, but not thoroughly on the Senate plan, just kind of some top level stuff. But the concern I have, just from a 30,000-foot view, is this might be a great package, right? I mean, it might not be. But is the president going to enforce the new law?
Absolutely.
Right? And that's the concern I think that my constituents have, and your constituents have, is are we going to pass a law? If we pass H.R. 2, which is a great product, and we should, and I hope that it gets signed into law one day, but is this president going to enforce it?
Yeah.
And I think that's the concern we have. And so where do we go from here? And I think we have to wield the power of the purse. I do think that. And I think where it goes is impeachment is a tool, and we should use it, as Josh said. Holding the Biden administration accountable and having these hearings is a tool, and we should do that. Passing H.R. 2 is a good tool. We should do that. But if we're really serious about it, we really want to fix it, we'll drive them to enforce the law.
Yeah.
Washington only responds to two things: force and money. Russell is exactly right. Power of the purse.
That's a good quote. I'm going to attribute you to that. That's a good one.
Dash Keith Self.
Now, Russell, you're on both Judiciary and the Oversight Committees. In my mind, those are both different committees than I ever experienced in the state legislature, because in Oversight, we're the investigatory arm of Congress. Judiciary does quite a bit of investigations. Correct. How have you enjoyed being on both of those committees?
It's awesome. I love the work. I think we got two incredible chairmen who are really, responsive and understand where the American people are, and their hearings kind of reflect that and what we focused on. I mean, in Judiciary, certainly you've got the Biden stuff, particularly as it pertains to the agency cover-up that's going on with some of the transactions. You've got the border, but then you've got some kind of nuanced, nerdy, wonky things on artificial intelligence too. I mean, so it just...
And you got the FISA reauthorization.
So you just have a lot of really meaty issues. And oversight's no different. I mean, it really is not. And but love the committee space.
You two are both on oversight.
Yeah.
You're on judiciary. You're a lawyer by trade.
Yeah.
Okay. What did you practice?
General practice. So
General
a little bit of
practice.
this, a little bit of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many years did you practice?
Oh, God.
I guess you practiced while you were in the state legislature.
I did.
continuously.
I think I've passed the bar in 2011, so about 12 years.
Oh wow. And either one of you on judiciary? No. In the state legislature, were you on it?
No.
So I did. Now I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
Okay. But my first year or two, I was on judiciary, and man, you talk about a crash course getting caught up to speed on you guys' lingo.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a hard committee.
Yeah. And it's still like that. I mean, honestly, you don't have to be a lawyer to be on judiciary, but I think it helps for sure. But yeah, you're right. Getting a crash course, and even if you are a lawyer, you're going to get a crash course. I mean, some of the concepts you talk about in the state legislature up here, you're something you never really dealt with. You know, environmental policy or wetlands mitigation in the state house. I mean, just weird stuff like that. So. Yeah, that's good.
And then you have the added responsibility that you added to yourself and got elected by us freshmen to be our class president. So for folks who are watching, give people a behind the scenes glimpse of how that vote occurred and what your responsibilities, what is the freshman class president?
Yeah, great question. Well, I was elected by y'all, and there was a guy that was running originally, but then backed out, and so it was
Who was that guy?
Kind of unanimous. George Santos.
Are you serious?
Serious, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So he was originally running, and then we had a talk. He left, and then so I got elected. I was unanimous. I think most of the positions were unanimous. But honestly, the cool thing about it when I ran was, if I run and win, great. If I run and lose, it's an opportunity to meet people up here that I can forge relationships with and alliances with. And to me, I thought it was a win-win. And it's been a really great experiment. We try to do things to pull the class together. Social events. We try to do things to make sure that we know how to be effective legislators up here. So learning the rules, learning ethics, learning how things move up here. People elected
move?
you. Well, that's true, but how they could move, I guess, is the better term. But it's people elected you to be effective, and so however you choose to do that, I think is important.
And for that period of time where we didn't have a speaker, where McCarthy was vacated, I think you provided a good value to the freshmen by organizing kind of our group sessions,
Yeah,
if you will, at the Library of
Catharsis.
Congress. Our
Catharsis, yeah.
moments. Because it was good for us freshmen to get together and kind of hear each other out.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of good dialogue that occurred out of those meetings.
Yeah, I thought so too. And it was important, look, I mean, our freshman class is very diverse in how they think. You got really strong conservatives in there, and you got people in very tough swing
Santos.
districts. And then so it was important to just get everybody together, and that way people can at least hear kind of what other people were thinking. And I think for the most part, we did pretty well, just kind of arriving at a natural conclusion. And so it's good to do that.
Well, thank you, Russell, for being our president, our class president.
Here.
Thanks for having me.
Here, here.
And thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
And injecting some good common sense conservative flair
we
into
need
the
some of that.
podcast. And to you, our amazing listeners, if you enjoyed the banter and the bold ideas, show us some love. Smash the like button, subscribe for your regular dose of freedom, and share it with your friends. The Fresh Freedom Podcast is your ticket to liberty, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, X, and Rumble. Make sure you're on board. Until next time, stay fresh and stay free. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Fresh Freedom Podcast.